Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Oh Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we continue with Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, verse 29. The chapter is entitled The Punishment and Reward of Kali. We're happy to have His Grace Dronacharya Prabhu from ISKCON, Philadelphia. Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome, Harrisburg family. It's great to be with you. Back in September, we're in September now, and ran into some school traffic this morning, so I apologize for being late.
No problem. I figured that's what it was.
Yeah, Monday morning. Yeah, so it's the first, I think, first time I've been back in Harrisburg. We're into the same problem, Philadelphia last week.
Very well.
It's great to be with everyone. What should I do? We're a few minutes late. Should we get right into the verse, or should we do Jai
You can
Bhagavatam?
just do like a short invocation opening, like very, very short.
Okay.
Probably like the pranams or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I was last week. I was a week early, so I got the pleasure of listening to Parikshit's class. After I chant the verse, does the audience also chant the verse?
Normally, yes.
Okay. All right. I apologize. I don't think I was doing.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Do that. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirajit Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, one should first offer one's respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human beings, unto the Goddess of Learning, Mother Saraswati, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attending classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and devotional service becomes established within one's heart as an irrevocable fact. So we're continuing in our reading today of the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 17, text 29. This is Maharaj Parikshit and his encounter with Kali. Tam jigam sam abhipretya vihaya nripalachanam tatparamulam shirasa samagadbaya vihavala. Tam jigam sam abhipretya vihaya nripalachanam tatparamulam shirasa samagbaya vihavala. Tam jigam sam abhipretya vihaya nripalachanam tatparamulam shirasa samagadbaya Valaha. Anything? Okay.
Tam gigasum abhipetya vihaya nipalanchanam tat paramulam shirasa samagad bhaya viva lam. Hare Krishna.
Tam jingam sumabhapritya vihaya nripalanchanam tatpadamulam shirasa samaghadbhaya vivala. Hare Krishna.
Any other devotees? Okay, we'll move on to the synonyms. Tam, him. Chigam, some. Willing to kill. Abhipritya, knowing it well. Vihaya, leaving aside. Nripa lachanam, the dress of a king. Tat paramulam, at his feet. Shirasa, by the head. Samagat, fully surrendered. Bhaya vivalaha, under pressure of fearfulness. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When the personality of Kali understood that the king was willing to kill him, he at once abandoned the dress of a king, and under pressure of fear, completely surrendered to him, bowing his head. Purport. The royal dress of the personality of Kali is artificial. The royal dress is suitable for a king or kshatriya, but when a lower class man artificially dresses himself as a king, his real identity is disclosed by the challenge of a bona fide kshatriya, like Maharaj Parikshit. The real kshatriya never surrenders. He accepts the challenge of his rival kshatriya, and he fights either to die or to win. Surrender is unknown to a real kshatriya. In the age of Kali, there are so many pretenders dressed and posed like administrators or executive heads, but their real identity is disclosed when they are challenged by a real kshatriya. Therefore, when the artificially dressed personality of Kali saw that to fight Maharaj Parikshit was beyond his ability, he bowed down his head like a subordinate and gave up his royal dress. Om Aganatam Barandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namom Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Tirtha Swami Niti Namine Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shatatmane Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Iti Namine Namom Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. When the personality of Kali understood that the king was willing to kill him, he at once abandoned the dress of a king, and under the pressure of fear, completely surrendered to him, bowing his head. Here we see that the personality of Kali and his encounter with Maharaj Parikshit. We have an example of somebody genuine coming into communication or contact with somebody who is artificial. Sometimes you see that somebody tries to make a citizen's arrest, or you see a regular, ordinary citizen, and maybe they may try to pose as a police officer or an authority, and they try to do some type of citizen activity. But we very clearly see right after that actually they have very little qualification, resources, or background. And they usually oftentimes, they're very limited in what they can do. And when they're placed side by side next to somebody who actually has the qualification, their natural tendency is to just basically step to the side because it's quite obvious and almost embarrassing to them. Srila Prabhupada, he was once talking about a Mayavadi, Mayavadi person who would come, and he'd tell everybody that he was a devotee. But Srila Prabhupada knew that, deep down he was a Mayavadi, even though sometimes he spoke like he was a devotee. And he said, do you know how, if a person speaks a bunch of different languages, how you know what is his native or original language? And he says, if you give him a slap, the language which he responds in will be the language of his, which will be his original language. And he said, similarly, if you insult this devotee, this person who says he's a devotee, but if you say something about, the Mayavadi philosophy, that's not very pleasant, see how he reacts. And if he reacts in a very defensive or a mood, then he will have exposed himself to who he really is. So in this way, it's a person who may be pretending, when they are challenged, their real, who they really are will come out. There's a story in the Mahabharata about Karna and Parshuram. Karna was the first son of Kunti, but due to the circumstances, he wasn't brought up with the other Pandavas, and he was kind of raised on his own. He felt neglected a lot of times. He wasn't given the training that his brothers were given. And we all know that this is all part of Krishna's Leela. But Karna had a very deep desire to be able to gain the military secrets, be trained in the martial arts that his brothers were. After all, he was the son of royalty, both from the sun god and from Queen Kunti. So he heard that Parshuram, who is an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appeared on earth in order to rid the earth of the Kshatriyas, when the Kshatriyas were misbehaving and actually causing such a disturbance to the earth, he appeared to actually rid the earth of the Kshatriyas. So he considered himself kind of an enemy of the Kshatriyas. So he would only train somebody who was of the Brahmin classification and train them in the arts. People like Dronacharya. He was born as a Brahmin and then was trained as a Kshatriya. So he was born as a Kshatriya, but wanted to get this training, and he knew that Parshuram would reject him if he knew he was a Brahmin. So in various ways, he disguised himself and created this false identity that he was a Kshatriya. So he was trained, and he became one of the favorites of Parshuram because he was so highly skilled, and he was a very obedient student and disciple. One day they were out. Parshuram went to take a nap, and he lay down, and Karna began massaging his head. And Parshuram, with his head rested on Karna's lap, fell asleep. While he was sitting there, a bee came and stung Karna on his leg. And he stung it, and he buried itself inside and began to bleed. And, it was very painful. And this went on for, maybe a few hours. And Karna he said, well, if I move, I'm going to wake up my guru, and I don't want to disturb his rest. So I'll just tolerate this pain. When Parshuram woke up, and he looked down, and he saw this blood coming from his leg, and he saw the swollen spot where the bee had stung him and the stinger, and right away he knew, this is a Kshatriya, and you have fooled me, because only a Kshatriya, somebody who is trained and born, born with the qualities of a Kshatriya, could be able to withstand and tolerate the pain and endure it for such a long period of time. So knowing that, he told Karna that, he said, Karna, I've given you all the secrets, but because you were deceitful, when you need to call on these military weapons, they will not be present before you. So in your greatest time of need, they will not be there. So fast forward into the Kurukshetra war, and Karna, he's out there, and he's fighting very valiantly, and he's creating a lot of, resistible force. I mean, he was a force to be reckoned with. And but at one point, by the desire of Lord Sri Krishna, who was orchestrating this whole entire battle, his wheel got stuck in the mud, and he couldn't get it out, and he forgot the mantra to be able to fix his chariot when in a circumstance like that. So he had to get off of his chariot and fix it, and at that time, he was killed in battle. So there's an example that when pressured, your true colors will come out. They say in this way, we can make the comparison to an orange. When you have an orange and you go to the store and you want to select the oranges, they all, for the most part, they all look the same, right? But the way to really determine the quality of an orange is when you squeeze it and you get the juice. And sometimes that juice is very sour. Sometimes that juice is very sweet. It's very hard to be able to determine just from the outer covering of the orange, because they all look more or less the same. But when you squeeze it under pressure, under challenge, the juice will reveal the quality of the orange. And in the same way, as people, as devotees, when we're challenged, when we're under pressure, it will reveal who we truly are. And in this way, in this pastime that we're reading here, Maharaj Parikshit, he challenged the personality of Kali. And under that challenge, Kali had to submit himself. He realized, even though I'm dressed like that of a king, I am actually a pretender, because there's no way that I will be able to stand before you in a confrontation or a battle and put up any type of fight. So therefore, he surrendered. And Srila Prabhupada said, surrender is unknown to a real Kshatriya. And we don't see that too often nowadays. But this was the culture that was built upon in the Kshatriya culture through the Varnashram system. We see it sometimes when we look at, the obviously through the Mahabharata and in the Vedas, we see it. But we also see it when we may have read about in school or seen movies about the Romans or the Spartans, and how they would fight, and they'd be told to, either, come back with your shield or come back on your shield. There was no question about, surrendering or giving up. In fact, it was an honor to die in battle. And there was no fear of dying in battle because the properly trained Kshatriya was understood that if you fulfill your prescribed duty, this is part of the Varnashram system, which will gradually elevate one, which was designed to gradually elevate one over many lifetimes, to get to the point of detachment. So the way you do it, and then ultimately to reawaken one's Krishna consciousness, you do your prescribed duty, not thinking of victory or defeat, but doing it out of your own training, doing it for the ultimate good of the work itself. And therefore, if you had to die in battle, you actually knew that you'd be promoted to the heavenly planets. We see this in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna is trying to convince Arjuna of this. He says, well, if you die, you'll attain, this is in the beginning, the end of the first, beginning of the second chapter. And if you die, in battle, you will actually achieve the higher planet. So why are you so worried about it? Don't you this is the code of honor for a Kshatriya. And Arjuna was by all means a Kshatriya. But had actually, in his bewilderment and under the illusion that he had fallen in, had wanted to actually abandon his Kshatriya nature and take to another nature, that of being a beggar. And this was not, this was not endorsed by Lord Krishna. In so many ways, people in the beginning parts of the Bhagavad Gita, when people explain what the Bhagavad Gita is about, they often say, well, it's about doing your duty. It's about, because Krishna speaks about this part. And obviously there's a lot more to it. And that's why we need a devotee to be able to explain Krishna's words, because it's not just simply about doing your duty. It's actually about doing your duty for the pleasure of Krishna, detaching yourselves from, the results of your activities, which will then help break these bonds that we have to the material world and allow us to reestablish our relationship back with Krishna. And this all has to be done under the guidance of a pure devotee. And therefore, we have Srila Prabhupada, who's given us the Bhaktivedanta purport so that we can properly understand the meaning of Krishna's words. So the king and its role in society, when we looked into the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 43 describes the nature and the work of a Kshatriya. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, leadership are all natural qualities of work for the Kshatriya. They play very important roles in today's in society. They're protectors, policymakers. They give a sense of order, and they also present a sense of fear, a healthy sense of fear within society, that if one acts up, has improper behavior, that won't be tolerated, and there are consequences to improper action. So they play a very important role. Srila Prabhupada mentioned, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in today's verse, that there are so many pretenders dressed and posed like administrators or executive heads, but their real identity is disclosed when challenged. Many of the administrators, fighters, military men and women in today's world are oftentimes Sudras. I remember when I forget who it was, is giving class. This is a long time ago, and he says most of them are Sudras with guns. You're basically armoring a class of uneducated people. A lot of times people are brought into the military and the police force. These are people that need some help, in either going to college, getting an education, and this is really the only way to get it, is by going into the armed forces or the police academy. So it's not something that is always looked upon as such an admirable type of field to be in. And then when you see like the leaders, you see the executive heads, the presidents, very rarely have any of them actually gone into battle, had any very difficult situations where they've had to take care of conflicts. Usually they're just lifelong politicians. They were county commissioners, and then they rose up to be city commissioners, and then they rose up to be maybe state commissioners, and then they they balance budgets, and they do work in offices. But very rarely do they get any type of experience having to actually do any type of protection work. A lot of times they're lawyers, sometimes they're businessmen, but at the same time, they have no problem sending young men and women out to battle over, well, they sit in an air-conditioned room and hear back upon reports. So this is what Srila Prabhupada is saying, is that this is not, what we have today is not the culture of what we're speaking about here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Going into bringing this back to devotional service. This nature of a Kshatriya, sometimes it needs to be exhibited. And we see in the life of Srila Prabhupada, in devotional service, this nature of being a Kshatriya, because for the most part, devotees are peaceful. The reason that we're peaceful is because we understand that in this world, there are real no friends and enemies based on material circumstances and situations. And that the situations that arise in this material world are based on the modes of material nature and the karmic reactions as a result of our previous action. And when you have this knowledge, when you're armed with this knowledge, then you can consciously decide not to become entangled in all these activities. And therefore, a devotee becomes peaceful because they have a relationship with Krishna, which transcends all of these conflicts that arise within this material world. However, when a devotee takes up to the practice of Krishna consciousness and wants to spread Krishna consciousness, there is without any doubt that there's going to be some disturbance with the material energy, whether it's temptation from the material energy or resistance placed in the by the material elements that will try to prevent the spreading of Krishna consciousness. In fact, that is Maya's job and her service in order to prevent Krishna consciousness from blossoming, because her job is to keep people here in the material world and to test them to see if they're truly right to go back to the spiritual world. So we see this even in the life of Lord Chaitanya. When he tried to start the Sankirtan movement, there was great resistance. Chankazi, many of the local, even those of the Hindu community, those that were caste Brahmins, a strong objection, to what Lord Chaitanya was trying to do. So Lord Chaitanya, in order to, spread Krishna consciousness, in order to establish the Yuga Dharma, which was for the benefit, the true benefit of all living beings. And of course, he was Lord Krishna himself. So we know that this is, the right and proper action. He had to present some type of resistance in order to establish the Sankirtan movement. So we have the past time when he, he gathered up and there was the civil disobedience, and they marched on the Chankazis. The governor, he was the governor there. So they came to his mansion and they created great fear within the Chankazi. And they were with their torches and they were chanting, and they had these slogans that they were saying. So we see that we have to resist, but as a devotee we should never become attached. We have to perform our service, but at the same time there may be times when we're called upon where Krishna consciousness is being challenged. And in order to establish Krishna consciousness, we actually have to be, strong in our presentation. Srila Prabhupada told one of his British disciples, he said that, we need to have the courage of an Englishman and the heart of a Bengali woman. And he was saying that, the English, they basically went around and at one point in time, a couple hundred years ago, they'd basically colonized so many places in this world, and they were able to have the courage, even amongst very difficult situations, to, be successful in their conquest. But he also said you have to have the heart and compassion of a Bengali mother. And that is meaning that, our mission is not to create any type of harm or disturbance to anybody. It has to be compassionate, because we're ultimately trying to deal with the liberation and the engagement of the spirit soul back into the service of Lord Krishna. And in this way, we should become fearless. Srila Prabhupada's name is Abhay Charan, and he was initiated. That was his birth name, and when he became initiated, it was Abhay Charanaravinda. Let me see, AC. That's what AC stands for. AC Bhaktivedanta. It's Abhay Charanaravinda, and that means one is fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna. And this is the real place, the real shelter that one can actually find true fearlessness in this world. Because at the lotus feet of Krishna, one understands that even if I were to die, even if I were to encounter some really difficult situation, Krishna will give me shelter. Krishna's lotus feet will give me the shade from the material energy that nothing else in this material world will give me. No other security will be there. And that shade comes in the form of Krishna's instructions. That shade of Krishna's lotus feet comes in the form of the engagement in devotional service and the constant remembrance of Krishna throughout our lives. Srila Prabhupada demonstrated at many times that he had to become strong and take on the qualities of that of a Kshatriya nature. He was a sannyasi, and sannyasis are also known for their fearlessness. In the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the first quality of divinity that Krishna speaks about is fearlessness. And that fearlessness is actually also the nature of one who's completely surrendered to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains that really only a person who has completely surrendered everything to Krishna can actually exhibit true fearlessness. Otherwise, we're fearful that this will be taken away from me. This material possession will be taken away from me. What will happen to my family? What will happen to what will happen to my job? What will happen to my possessions? What will happen to my reputation, etc. When we place everything in the hands of Krishna for Krishna's pleasure, and we offer our lives in Krishna's service, we can actually become truly fearless. Before Srila Prabhupada came to America, and he went to I forget her name, Srimati Sumarji. I think that was her name. She was the lady that
Srimati Murarji.
Morarji.
Yes.
Thank you. And she was the one who got Srila Prabhupada. He secured him his ticket for passage to the United States. So she lived right near Juhu Beach. So Srila Prabhupada had to go visit her. And when he was traveling to Juhu Beach, he kept walking past. He walked past this plot of land that was about 4 acres in an area, and he would always think that this would be a very nice location for a Radha Krishna temple. If they fast forward, over a decade later, and Srila Prabhupada, once the Hare Krishna movement began, he pursued this plot of land, and he said, I want to now make this into the Hare Krishna temple, which is now the Juhu temple, Hare Krishna land. And it was not easy for Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. Giriraj Maharaj wrote a book on this. I'll build you a temple. Wonderful book. I recommend to the devotees to read about just Srila Prabhupada's spirit of never giving up. When we read about Kshatriya never surrenders, Srila Prabhupada exhibited this quality in the service of Lord Sri Krishna directly as his devotional service to the Lord. They were dealing with a landlord who was very crooked, and that landlord had many different agents who would come and make assassination attempts and threats to the devotees. They were connected, with very different various municipal officials, and therefore they created such hardships and obstacles to the devotees. And even though Srila Prabhupada went about it in the proper way to purchase the land and give the money, it was, it was an effort for these corrupt officials to try to steal, essentially, from Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. But Srila Prabhupada would not be denied. He was persistent, he was relentless, and he showed tremendous sacrifice and perseverance. Srila Prabhupada spent more time than anywhere else in the world that he spent in Bombay, because this was such an important, he considered this such an important establishment. One, he knew that this would be a huge temple for the Hare Krishna movement, and then also that this would also be a great victory for the Hare Krishna movement if they were able to be successful in winning this case and getting what was their natural right to have. And at the end, when the conveyance of the land was finally signed over to Srila Prabhupada, and this was after a 6-year legal battle, and during those 6 years, there were death threats, there was manipulation, corruption, all different types of just horrific experiences. And the devotees at that time, I tell you, they lived in these huts. I remember Mother Narayani, she was explaining how they would work and they'd be out, 16 hours a day, practically, that they would be working. And all they would come back to is this little tent. Sometimes they had mosquito nets, sometimes they didn't. There were rats basically running in and out of the tent all night long over top of them. They were eating, very, very little, it was really an austere lifestyle. But they were doing this because they were determined, as Srila Prabhupada was determined, to be successful. And this level of heroism in Krishna service, is celebrated. Srila Prabhupada declared after a 6-year-long battle, and they finally got the deed to the land. He said, "It was a good fight." And that was Srila Prabhupada's, response. He said, "It was a good fight." And then he would also say that if, without a good fight, you won't have a glorious victory. And in those glorious victories, Krishna and his devotees become even more and more celebrated. And you can understand Krishna's mercy, how Krishna works, and Krishna's hand in everything. If everything was just very smooth in our lives, if preaching was very easy, perhaps it wouldn't be so glorious. Perhaps we would take it for granted. Perhaps we would often think that maybe we're the doer and we wouldn't depend and rely on Krishna to the extent that we need to rely on Krishna. So these are some considerations. I'll end here and see if there are any questions and thoughts and realizations from the devotees. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for such a wonderful class, Prabhu. Sometimes when the purport seems short and simple, but it's very, very deep. And you touched upon so many wonderful points. So thank you so much. Would like to ask devotees if any questions, any comments, any realizations, please do unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand and we will definitely call upon you. Or you can even put in the chat and we will be happy to read your question. Prabhu, I really like the point that you said, that actually Saurabh and I were going back and forth a little bit just now about a true color of a person is exhibited when they're under pressure. That was a really strong point you made. You know, it's a really strong point. And what I wanted to ask was, because we know, which is very true, that a true color of a person is exhibited when one is under pressure. And when the color is not very attractive, how does one develop an attractive color when one is under pressure? Am I making sense here, Dronacharya?
Say that again. So
like, for example, right, when we are under, like, say, for example, when we are under pressure, we show colors of laziness, which is not conducive for Krishna consciousness. So how can we change that laziness to something positive when that is exhibited when we are under pressure?
It's a good question. How do we we need some direction oftentimes. Sometimes if we know we're lazy, sometimes there will maybe there's some lower qualities. Maybe there's, and I say this word cowardice in the way that, where we're unwilling to persevere through difficulty, and just give in. Maybe there's some weakness of heart. And these are all natural things. I'm not talking about cowardice in the sense of physical strength or, tackling somebody with a gun, or not cowardice in that way. But in the sense where we're just not willing to stand up. A lot of times we need to get inspiration, from people that have it, because if you don't have something, you need to gain it from somebody who has it. So we need to be open. First thing is to recognize, okay, I have this weakness of heart. I have these qualities that are not conducive for Krishna consciousness. So oftentimes situations may come about where maybe we become exposed, our lower natures become exposed, and then there's some humility that arises from that. So maybe we become humiliated in a situation, and that humiliation is actually could be a very good thing, because that may be a starting point for us to say, you know what, I don't like where I'm at. I don't like this. I don't like the way I reacted to that situation. I wasn't very, that wasn't the proper response to that situation. I gave into my lower nature. I gave up in a situation where I should have kept going. And as a result, I kind of got humbled. I got humiliated, and that won't allow me that, I don't want that to happen again. So in that way, it's going to be good. And then we have to seek out, the inspiration of okay, how are we going to prevent that from happening again? A lot of times that inspiration is in good association. And in that way, we can begin to, build upon those qualities. So, but we can't remain a pretender, because if we remain a pretender, Krishna will, we will get exposed, just like the, Kali got exposed in front of Parikshit. There will be times when, we're challenged, and are we going to rise up to that challenge? It could be, it could be in so many different circumstances in Krishna consciousness and in life. But specifically as a result of our service, if one is a preacher, and they're out preaching, there's so many challenges that come about. If one is in administration and temple management. The challenges, are boundless. It's coming for every good act you do. There's, you're getting arrows in your back, all the time. And so you have to be able to, act in a way which is, with strength and conviction, but also the heart of a Bengali mother. And then also you may just find yourself on a personal level, quarreling with, qualities that you have a hard time being able to overcome. And we also have to address them with courage and heroism, and not give in. So we have to identify it. If some humiliation comes as a result of it, whether it's public humiliation or personal, private humiliation, we have to embrace that as an exposure that Krishna is giving us of what you don't want to become. And then you have to seek that inspiration and association, so that we can become who we want to become and who we want to Krishna service.
So what I'm gathering, Prabhu, it boils down to being in the right association to snap out of that, and also to have the willpower or the awareness to want to change. So that will humble us.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll give just this is just a completely hypothetical situation.
Sure, please.
Completely hypothetical, right? Say there's a devotee who's always talking, always kind of maybe self-promoting themselves, oh yeah, I have no problem staying up all night and doing whatever needs to be done in Krishna service. I'm completely, completely fine with that. Anything, I'm strong-willed. My body's strong, this and that, right? And then comes a situation and we say, okay, we need, Rath Yatras the next day, and we're doing this marathon, Prabhu, it seems like a service that you really would like to do, and you're always talking about how enthusiastic you are, and then they come and say, well, actually, last night I really didn't get so much sleep, and you gotta run an errand, and but maybe I can come back again. And I say, Prabhu, you're always talking though. This is your situation. This is your time to shine. This is the service. It's meant for you. We really need people like you. To really step up. And well, it's really not. And so we can see. Again, completely hypothetical. And sometimes we want to be seen in a certain way. We want people to perceive us in a certain way. But then when we're called upon, there's all these different various excuses that come up, and we're unable to rise to the occasion in Krishna service. So better we don't promote ourselves so much. We don't promote our qualities. I think it was Theodore Roosevelt, one of the presidents of the United States. He would say, tread softly, but carry a strong stick. So it's basically, show through your actions who you are, not so much by your words who you are. When you're called into service, when you're called into situations, you exhibit yourself. Don't necessarily self-promote yourself, and then come up later on that you're not able to back it up. And what we see here with Kali, he was promoting himself, as a Kshatriya, as a king. He wore the dress of a king, maybe spoke the words of a king, but when challenged, he was exposed. And with that brings humiliation. And what is the humiliation? Well, he had to bow down before Maharaj Parikshit. So we have to be careful in that way.
A very good point, Prabhu. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. In fact, that was another point that you mentioned. If anyone would like to ask, please do raise your hand and jump in, because I have something else that I can always stop if someone wants to jump in and ask their question. When you were speaking, when you were reading on the qualities, I think, or the characteristics of a Kshatriya from 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I was realizing that Srila Prabhupada had those qualities, even though he was a sannyasi, but I think he had those Kshatriya heroic qualities, from the Bhagavad Gita. He was fearless, he was heroic, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was everything, because he was a pure devotee of the Lord.
Yeah.
And Krishna gave him that Shakti to execute as needed for his service. That's, how heroism.
Yep.
He certainly exhibited heroism so many times. The past time I just told, but when he got on that ship, on the Jaladuta, with only the equivalent of $8 in his pocket, he picked up 200 sets of books, first canto volume, 3 volumes of Bhagavatams on the way. But he knew he was going to a land where he knew nobody. He knew no one. He was going to a place he'd never been to. He didn't know what to expect. And his health was not that good. He was turning 70 years old. As soon as it started off, he became seasick. This was not a 2 or 3 day voyage. This was not a 1 week voyage. This was a 36-day travel, through rough seas. He suffered
and 2 heart attacks.
And then seasickness. I don't know if anybody, if you've ever gotten seasick.
One time on a boat, and that was enough to not have me do it again.
Yeah. My father was a fisherman, and I used to have to go out with him when I was young fishing, and I would always get seasick. And it was horrible. It was like the worst feeling. It's like you want to vomit to get it over with, but you can't vomit. It's just that feeling that stays with you of just nausea constantly. And he endured that, the whole time. And so he definitely showed these qualities of heroism, courage, and then resourcefulness. When he got here, again, he had nothing. He had a couple contacts. Butler, Pennsylvania is like one of the remote places in America. His host family was embarrassed of him. He couldn't even stay there, and they were like, he's living at the YMCA, and but due to his resourcefulness, he established the Hare Krishna movement. Exhibited such amazing leadership that within 11 short years, around the world, 108 temples, thousands of disciples, Hare Krishna, no one even knew about it. It became, a household name. And Srila Prabhupada didn't back down. He rose to the challenge. And how was he able to do that? He was fearless, because he took shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. And we read about his dependency on Krishna in the 2 poems that he wrote while he was one when he was on the Jaladuta, and then the other when he was at the pier in Boston, when he was basically like, Krishna, I'm completely dependent upon you. Don't know why you've brought me here. I don't know what, plan you have for me. But if this is going to be successful, it will only be because you desire it, Please make me an instrument in your service. Make me a puppet and make me dance as you like. This is, tremendous, what Srila Prabhupada exhibited, specifically in this realm of the nature of courage, determination, heroism, leadership. And these are just a few of the examples. They can be elaborated on more and more.
Amazing, Prabhu. Yeah, it's so true how much we take the movement for granted, and all the results is from Srila Prabhupada's sacrifices. That we are enjoying the fruits of it, lack of a better word. Really, really amazing points. Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to share something, say something, a feedback, a takeaway from this amazing class? Actually, really showing that Prabhupada was a true Kshatriya in his own way. Absolutely. And would like to remind devotees that which we did announce yesterday, that September 23rd is the last Rath Yatra on the East Coast, which always ends in Philadelphia. And it'll be very nice if we all can go out and support Dronacharya, and who is right here. And he is one of the main organizers behind the whole scene of the Rath Yatra, making it happen. And we know that it's no easy feat. They got it 10,000 times more bigger than we do. So please, if we, when whoever can go, please do support, serve, and engage in some service for the Philadelphia Rath Yatra. It's always a nice festival because that closes the whole Rath Yatra season, actually, for us on the East Coast. So it's like, okay, shop is closing, we'll see you next year, kind of a thing. So please do join us. And we thank you all for joining this morning's class. And Dronacharya, thank you for such a meditative class. Vanshakapribhyascha kripasindhabevacha patitanam pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you so much, Dronacharya. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
See
Hare
everybody
Krishna.
September 23rd.
Yes, 23rd September. Hari Hari Bol.
If you have any book distributors, I know you had someone there, Nitya Gopal.
Right here, Nitya Gopal is right online.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Wonderful, wonderful class. Dandut Pranam to all devotees. Yes, Prabhu will be there actually while lecture was happening. Mukta, what's Prabhu's name? Mukta Sangha Prabhu contacted regarding the presence on the mantra meditation book stall. We were there last year. We enjoyed our participation and helping chanting the devotees. So we'll be there this year and helping in mantra meditation, both Prabhu, and we'll help in the book distribution also. Right. Is there anything you would like to? No.
If that's perfect. He reached out to you. Just want to make sure his mother Anasuya gave permission to, engage the devotees. This is a big day for preaching, and we want to make sure that we make contact with as many guests that come to the festival as possible. So, and then there's other services as well. If you're not a book distributor and you want to help serve prasadam or help, some other ways, you'll definitely find a way. And if not, just come and enjoy the festival. We also need devotees chanting and dancing and just, experiencing the bliss of Krishna consciousness.
What I will do, Dronacharya, is I will send an email out to our congregation, especially because I know the help that always is needed is the prasadam part, the prasadam serving part. That seemed to always be the need. But if there's anything, just send me the list and I'll send an email out to the congregation. And also the contact person, so when they go there, they know who to, POC person.
Sure.
For the services. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for engaging us, and thank you for keeping us enlivened. And we thank the devotees for joining and supporting the Philadelphia Rath Yatra. It's always a wonderful Rath Yatra. Thank you so much. Hari Hari Bol.
Jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.